Cool. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Shiur, and nice to see everybody. We are starting a new mini-series today, which is on the topic of collective identity. So we discussed, if so maybe some people will hear for some of it. We had a series before on who am I, in terms of understanding us as individuals and our spiritual anatomy and things like that. But now we're kind of doing that on a collective level. And what does it mean to be a member of Am Yisrael? What does it mean to be Jewish? And to some extent, what does it mean to be a member of humanity? And how do we interact between the different members of humanity, i.e. Jews and non-Jews? And what's the model? What's the spiritual model for how that stuff is meant to work? So we'll take a few steps to get there. But today we're just trying to get a most basic understanding of the idea of the Jewish people. And for that, we have to talk about Achdut. We have to talk about how to translate that word.
Unity.
So unity, which is fine. I think there's another translation which could exist, and I think it means the same thing in Hebrew, is oneness. So it could be maybe there's a nuance in the English between those. I don't think there's a different Hebrew word for those things. Hey, welcome. Come in, feel free to get stuck in. So we're talking about what it means to be part of Am Yisrael. So that's the question right here. So before getting into the sources and the likes, I just wanted to hear from anyone here. Do you have a really good Achdut story? Anything that you saw, which was like a really like kind of Jewish unity, like the way it's meant to be? There should be a lot of chairs. If there's not, feel free to unstack those ones over there as well.
Unfortunately, I've seen a lot more of the opposite.
Yeah, I think that no, but I think you can address this is the part of the underlying point is that this is something that we need to work on a lot.
Well, it's easier for us to see negative.
But
I think
no, I mean us to work on is making sure that we have less negative, but in terms of seeing for sure, and that's why we're here. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this year.
When the war started, you had the Chilonim war succeed, and then you'd have these non-kosher restaurants that wanted to get proper kosher roots. That was great.
Yeah. I think it was a special. I mean, it's obviously a very painful time in many ways, but it was a very special time. Are you thinking something, Jenny?
I think it's very easy to see it when there's trouble times that come up. Like we have strife, we have trouble, and all of a sudden people come together. But unfortunately, why do we have to wait for that to happen? I have seen many times on, for example, Birkat Kohanim at the Kotel, like thousands of people come together, hundreds of how many come together. And I think, well, sort of going back to more of a troubled time, but the rallies when I was in England, the pro-Israel rallies were really beautiful and in some ways unifying in many ways less, because unfortunately you can see which demographic turn up and which don't turn up.
Right. But I'll give you that. Like even something relatively uniting is like we'll take it. Like we've got to take everything we can get really here, I think. I remember also it's kind of like in the middle it was like a happy time within a sad time. But if someone remember the name, does anyone remember the name of the female hostage who they got back?
Noah Argami, I think.
No, was it Noah?
She was the one with the
What happened?
Who they captured her back? Was it Noah? I don't think
Yeah,
that's right. Was it? Yeah.
So Zamora is the one that died in that operation.
Right.
It was Noah Argami and 3 hostages. So Zamora died. It was on Shabbat. He opened up the door. He knew he'd probably get shot, or someone had to open the door. So he's a hero. He's a good son.
Was there by any chance someone even like earlier on one female soldier who got? I thought it was where it was just one. Honestly, I wanted to look up the name before, but I forgot. So it could have been Noah, but I know she got freed with a few other people.
Noah's 3 other
at least
people.
6 months
Noah
in.
plus 3.
It was like early on.
Yeah, it was early.
It was
early.
like she was 6 months.
So I recall.
And they like called him on the beach, and it was like this huge thing.
So they have some.
And I just recall seeing this video, which was just I'm just like I have to not cry just thinking about it. It was crying so much at the time. It was basically like these Hasidim, which were what we call in the UK a roundabout. Is that what you call it? That across a traffic circle. Is that what they say? Who says traffic circle?
Well,
A key car, yes. A roundabout. Okay.
Yeah.
A traffic circle, if you want. Basically, they were literally dancing, these Hasidim, they were literally dancing in the streets at the news of the fact that we'd got this female, ostensibly not necessarily even religious, like soldier back. These are people who in another world would maybe not be so in favor of soldiers, certainly not really whatever, and certainly obviously from a different demographic. And they were literally dancing. There was music playing. They were literally dancing in the streets. And it was just one of the most. It was just like this is it. Like this is what we need.
Yes, sure.
And yeah, and so these moments exist. And as some people are mentioning, maybe unfortunately sometimes it's harder times which has brought this out of us. But these moments, it can happen. It can happen. And so what we were going to discuss a bit today was a bit more about the spiritual underpinnings of what's going on with us understanding ourselves as a people and how that works. So I'll give you to take one and pass around, if you like. There you go.
I do consider sometimes, like on Shabbat, you hear Torah reading, you think all around the world, and every single shul, we're all reading the same thing.
Oh, well, that's
it's
something.
a different shul, fine, it's a different thing, fine, but we'll
but even more so, maybe we'll even come back to that point, because even more so something, I think there's something enriching about the unity when it is a little bit different going on in different places, and yet there's this, and I think you'll see it written on the sheet as Jewish oneness across time and space, and we'll come to that point where there is something which is very significant, even not for people who are just in a room together, but even something which is broader than that. So basically the source over here, the main source of the night, is just this unbelievable section of the Tanya, which has tons to say, and we for sure can't go into all of it tonight. And I think basically what I'd say, like, this is one of those things where like sometimes like the entry level is very surprising. I would say here, the entry level is not that surprising. It's like quite interesting, not that surprising. But then like when you actually think about it more and think about the implications of it, it's absolutely game changing. It's a very, very different view to how we're used to going about thinking about who we are as a people. So let's have a little bit of a look at this first section of the first source over here. So it says, Yesh Ribavot Minei Chalukim Madrigot B'Neshamot Gavoa al Gavoa La'en Kates. So there's such a thing as levels of neshamot. Everyone has a soul, and there is such a thing as some people's souls are on higher levels than others. This is not a comment on morality or rewards, by the way. Just there is such a thing as their souls on different levels than others. Kumo Godel Ma'alat Nishmot Ha'avot U'Moshe Rabbeinu Alav Shalom Al Nishmot Dorotenu Ele De'ikvei De'Mashiach. Sheim bechinat akivayim mamash legabe hamoach v'arash. So you have kinds of people who'd be candidates to be at the top, the highest levels in the neshamot. We've got the avots, we've got Moshe. They're all the way up there. And then as you go down, you've got what he calls people from our generation, who's got a timeline for the Balatanya. For me, he was 18th century, right? I forget it every single time. When was the Tanya? 18th century, meaning
I think so, that makes
Yeah.
sense, like.
Okay. It was something like that.
It was the first.
Yeah.
Would have to be.
I think that's
Unless it's
about
like
right.
the late.
I think that sounds about right, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. But I just didn't want to come down because I've done this before. Maybe you were there. I'm not sure. I think I said a timeline for something and it was wrong. So we're gonna just to have a fact check over here. So, but the alternate exactly. So he's saying Dorotenu. So that's already quite some time ago. So we can certainly relate to this. We're certainly within the kind of categories. You have those high level neshamot up, like Moshe, etc. And then you have lower level neshamot, which is like our generation, what he calls the Ikved de Mashiach, which is what they call like the kind of pre-Mashiach generation. And he calls it Akivai, which relates to the word heels. And we'll see that we'll get into this analogy more soon, but he says it's like the heels legabe hamoach v'arash. You've got the head at the top and the heels at the bottom, and there's a certain on a certain level that describes the level of I think there's more, by the way, pens if people need over there.
Rav Shneur Zalman, first published in 1796.
So we just got in there. When was he born? Or born and died?
It was.
1796. Okay, so we just got in there.
1796,
Yeah, I was thinking a little earlier, honestly, but I'll give myself that.
Wait, that's when he was born?
No, that was the publishing of the
Of the
of the time.
1745 to 1812.
Okay. So around, not bad for not bad for having looked it up about 5 times and forgotten it every single time. But there's such a thing as different levels of neshamot. We have those in those high generations. Our generation a bit lower. You can already see starting to allude to this analogy, which he's going to go into in a big way. Yeah, sure.
This high level of soul, different levels of soul, is that from birth or from what they've worked on together?
Good question. Primarily, it means from birth. And so there are nuances, but the general thing is like our work in life is more to be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah.
So that does mean climbing, because we have within us and our where we start as individuals and our potential. So there's quite a lot of scope. But there are certain things which are typically kind of a given. Happens to be, so since we were talking about autism earlier. I'll just give you, if it, just as by way of analogy, Simon Baron-Cohen's book on 0 degrees of empathy. You ever read that? So anyone else? Anyway, Simon Baron-Cohen is, I think it was a cousin or something of Sasha. I think he's not that close to him. But it's quite amazing. Like the name Baron-Cohen goes even across cousins. But he's like a big neuroscientist and is a big autism expert and other things. But the way he kind of explains what you calls like a person's ability for empathy is like you get a certain blueprint at birth, and then you can work within that blueprint. You could have a little bit less, a little bit more, depending on life circumstances and all different kinds of things. But you probably won't necessarily move from one level of blueprint to another. There's a large amount of that is true for levels of neshama as well. I think there's some kind of maybe exception sometimes, but as a general rule, that's kind of how it is. So like,
Isn't it kind of like nature and nurture?
he's basically giving a model for nature and nurture. He's just giving an analogy of how that works, and there's a certain truth in that on a spiritual level as well. So there's not everything is a given from birth, but there are some things which is a general framework which you are working with from birth, which is basically nature and nurture, is what you said. So anyway, so it's a bit like that on a spiritual level, talking about the different levels of neshama. So it said, "V'chein b'chol dor v'dor yesh rashi alfei Yisrael shenishmotehem hem bechinat rosh v'amoach legabe nishmot ha'amon v'amei haaretz." So that's really the main thing. And now within generations. So what he talked about before was across generations. You have the kind of Avot and the Har Sinai generation, very high, and then like going down, you have our generation, which is on a lower level of our neshamas. And said also within each generation as well, there's an entire paradigm. You have higher levels, you have lower levels, and maybe we'll just get into it because he's already kind of pushing this in quite a big way. There's plenty of food. Feel free to come take. He's got this analogy of the human body, right? And the way that we're relating to each other, the different Jewish souls are relating to each other, is as different parts of a human body. So he's given kind of the extremes of like you have the head, and then you have like lower down until you get to the heels. That's something which is across generations. That's something which is within any generation. But basically, what is being said over here is that as we look at each other around this table, around this room, we're not looking at different individual entities. We're looking at different parts of ourselves. So we're all just basically different, and Dev started to talk about this a little bit last week, but we're basically so this is why it's like a line which is quite easy for us to go to. It's like, oh yeah, we're all one. But like to actually process what it means that we're all one is very challenging because our experience is not that way. Our experience is that I'm a person and you're a person, and maybe we can be friends, but not that we are just different parts of the same thing. I'm really just looking at myself.
We
I'm looking at
were targeting anyone to show it that we're all one.
So he's bringing. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Does the Torah require us to look at ourselves as Amachad?
Sort of, meaning number one, according to the Tanya, if you're on this sheet, according to the Tanya's presentation, this is something which is a reality. So there's no, even if we were to say there's no commandment that one must kind of like what's it called, kind of like look at each other as if we were different parts of the same thing. It's also just is a reality. So it's a good idea to be in touch with reality, and at least that we can say. Happens to be that it could be there is a place where the Torah says this. Anyone know what I'm thinking of? Oh, that's true. That's a very good one. I wasn't thinking of that, but when it talks about us camping at Har Sinai, it uses the singular. It uses the singular what's it called? Conjugation of vayichan of this verb, and it talks about us, this group of people, in the singular. So that's a good allusion to it. And then Chazal elaborates on it. It was like we're one person. And again, that could be before this Tanya, we could be understanding that in a kind of a philosophical level, a metaphorical level, that there's a certain level of unity. But that's why I'm kind of pushing the translation as one of oneness over unity, because what we're seeing is a bit more than that. It's not just that we're all friends, it's that there's an actual oneness between us. And that's something which is as we're saying, across generations, within generations. I'll tell you the thing that's actually a really good example. Kind of in many ways, it was like living our best life at Har Sinai, right? About to receive the Torah. And that's where you see us kind of being in touch with reality in this major way. The other thing I was thinking of in terms of a mitzvah was V'ahavta Re'echa Kamocha. The mitzvah says you should love, your friends, you should love your fellow as yourself. So if you think about it, it could be saying this exact idea. V'ahavta Re'echa Kamocha, as if they are you. Not just as if you would like to, like, what does that mean? We usually think love them as if the way that you would like to be loved. That's certainly a fulfillment if you do that, but it's not actually what the words say. What the words actually say is like you. Love the other person like you. So it could be that maybe the Torah in that line is alluding to maybe there is an importance to actually viewing that oneness, of viewing like you are me and I'm you to some extent.
The Keruvim.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Keruvim. When we were like the more ideal of a place
Nice.
we were in as a whole, the more they were directly looking at each other.
Yeah,
and it was right after Shlomo HaMelech that the Keruvim started to look a little bit away from each other.
Yeah, I think that's right. So what Brian's alluding to is in the Nefesh Chaim talks about it quite a lot. It's based on Chazal, but the Keruvim, the cherubs on the top of the Aron, I'm just like drawing it with my hands, but on top of the Aron Kodesh, these kind of angelic figures, which are winged figures, which are on top. So the Chazal say, it's based on Psukim, but Chazal say that they would, when we were doing the will of God, that they would be looking towards each other, and when we're not doing the will of God, they would be looking a bit away from each other. And so it's miraculous, movement of these things, and so that certainly can relate to this idea of oneness. Yeah, very great points. So let's read a little more over here. So we've got this idea that you have different neshamot, even on different levels, across generations, within generations, but the way that we relate to each other is not really necessarily as different individuals, but in fact as different parts of the same entity. So they say v'chein nefashot legabe nefashot ki kol nefesh klula mi nefesh ruach neshama. So we not necessarily going into that so much, but we talked about, some of us have talked about it here, that there's different levels within the soul, nefesh, ruach, neshama. But even within the neshama, even though there's a certain diversity within the neshama, it's still one thing. So he's talking about even on the individual level, even you say, oh, but there's a nefesh and there's a ruach, maybe it's different. So there's unity on the individual level, on the generation level, across generations. This is all existing. And he says, ki mikomakom, shoresh kol hanefesh ruach neshama kulam meirosh kol hamadrigot atsof kol dargin. All of the souls from the highest of all the levels, all the way until the end, tamluash beguf ami haaretz v'kal shebekalim, even in those kind of like lowly individuals, so the highest level souls to all the lowest level souls, nimshach mimoach elyon shi chochma ilah kaviyachol. They are coming, all of those souls are emanating from God. So it's Hashem who is the source of all the souls, not just the good guys and the ones who are wise and doing all the best stuff, but even the ones we called Amei Haaretz, which are not people who are doing the best stuff. If you are a Jewish soul, meaning if you are a Jew, then your essence is Jewish soul, and that means that you are coming from Hashem, just like everyone, just like those people who are the leader of the Moshe Rabbeinu, and us.
Why does it have to be Jewish?
So you'll talk about that in a minute. So that's gonna be really a later shir, maybe the next two, but at least one of the next two shirim. We have to see and how we're going to relate this back to humanity. But let's even just use a little bit of the next line to start to relate to your question. So it says, "Kamashal haben shenimshach memoach av." So what he's coming to answer, the bigger picture of this chapter, which I didn't quote the whole chapter for you, it's already quoted tons, that he's coming to explain what does it mean that in the Torah, the Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, are called the children of God, B'ni B'chori Yisrael. That Yisrael is my firstborn child. That's what Hashem says. Bani matem l'Hashem Elokeichem, that you're children to God. So he's saying, what does that mean? So what he's saying here, which is, he's taking this following thing as a given, which is quite funny, because this is very surprising and also something to internalize, is that the relationship between parent and child is one where the child is drawing their life from the parents always, meaning not just, we know the parents generated the life of the child. That much we know. That's just biology. But from that point onwards, just on a purely biological level, that's it, basically. Maybe there's caregiving, that's another thing. But basically, this idea is that for what he calls the father and son, the parent and the child, is that the parents are actually constantly giving the life to the child. And that's like Hashem is constantly giving the life to us. So to start to answer your question, we won't be able to fully answer it just yet, is that there's a different, all of humanity and the world for that matter are all Hashem's creations. And so that's the one thing. But it only says about Yisrael that we are God's children. So God created, it has a plan for every single person and for that matter, every single thing in the world. But there is clearly something unique about the Jewish people, just from the words of the Torah, not necessarily self-evident, but just from the words of the Torah. There's something different between just being a creation, which is something which has a special relationship, and being a child, which is obviously a certain unique kind of special relationship. So it's the beginning, but we'll need more information to answer your question fully. But yeah, so let's read a little more. So this is like the child who is getting their life from the moach, from the mind of the father. She'afilu tzipornei raglav nitavu mitipa zo mamash. That even the toenails. Shout out, someone in the Zoom here. I got toenails done in Jerusalem not too long ago. That was my mom. I was on Zoom. Yeah, I brought the kids to watch her getting her toenails done. And don't tell them, our oldest son did a wee in the shop. They didn't know that. Anyway, but even the toenails, right, which is the lowest part, it's in the lowest part of your body, and it's also like, if I understand correctly, like toenails, they're not alive, right? Nails are not alive. That's how it works. So it's like the part of you which is you, but it's not even like, it's like barely clinging on to any kind of existence. So those are all coming from the same source. In the case of a human being, apparently the life, or even all parts of the child, are coming from the parents. It's coming initially from the initial start is the father, and then going to the mother and developing in the womb of the mother for 9 months, and then everything differentiates and becomes different parts of the body. V'yarda mimadrega l'madrega leishtanot litavot mimena tzipornaim. And what comes out of all that is this thing which is like this pure source of life develops into all these different parts to the extent of even having toenails. Im kolze, even though this thing which is part of the child, which ends up very, very far from this initial kind of spirituality, v'im kolze odenu kshura miyuchedet beyichud nifla v'atzum b'mahuta v'atzmuta harishon shaita tipat moach av. It's nevertheless, it always remains connected with this unbelievable unity to its source, which is in the mind of the father. So there's a lot of terminology there, but basically what we want from that is that just as what the Tanya is giving us is just as that there's this relationship between parent and child, which is pretty in and of itself. He's using that as the thing which is meant to help us understand the other thing, but that in and of itself is like pretty crazy thing. I think this is for me, by the way, was probably the most important parenting book I ever read was this paragraph of the Tanya. It's like it's a completely new thing. Like when you think about that, the life of your children is constantly coming from you every single moment, not just when you're around them, you know? So it matters what you do even when you're not around them for the well-being of your child. Very interesting. But nevertheless, but the child is one entity. That's the point. The child is one entity. They have different parts to them, but the child is still one entity. And nevertheless, there's this diversity of parts, there's a unity of who the child is, and that is never and always all of the parts, because it's one unit, it is always connected all the way back up to the parent. So what the Tanya wants with that is back to Klal Yisrael and Hashem, back to God and the Jewish people, is that there's all different kinds of parts of one body. But number one, we're all parts of one body. We are ultimately united, and even more united. We're kind of one. And all of us, we said, oh, there's these levels and this diversity, but all of it, regardless of the diversity, is all coming from that same source at every moment, that God is giving each neshama its life. It's every moment. So there's a lot of information over there. I don't know if we'll do the second paragraph because we'll see how much time we've got, because it's also a very intense part, but it's very interesting. But let's just process this for a second. So number one, as we're saying, the idea of Jewish unity, even to some extent Jewish oneness. So this is something we have, and so this is like an exercise that we can do. I do this sometimes. I think we should do this like a lot actually, but I only do it sometimes. Is that you should look at a stranger on the street, especially in Israel. You can do this. Maybe in Manchester, you have to search for a Jewish stranger on the street. And just like look at them, don't let them know that you're looking at them, but look at them and say, gosh, I'm the same, like I'm one with that person. And then you can do it even more when they're like a different ashkafa to you or something like that, like a different way of life, different demographic. Sometimes I do this with, I'll be honest, I'm not a saint. I do sometimes have negative feeling towards people. I'm like, that's an understatement. But then I sometimes try and do this experiment. I'm literally the same as this person I feel wrongs me or whatever. I'm literally part of the same thing as them. It's interesting thing to do when you're in those moments,
Is
actually.
that part of for the grace of God go I?
What does that mean?
That expression that's well used when you see,
Yeah.
let's say an uni,
Yeah.
and you say, the only thing that separates me from that is that I've had the grace that live the life I'm living, and unfortunately, the uni doesn't.
Yeah, well, that's a very important point as well in terms of, the differences between us are not always up to us, up to life choices. That's very true. And even regardless of where they're from, let's say they were from life choices. I'm just being extreme for a second. Let's say it was life choices. Sometimes that happens. I'm not, you can't necessarily know that in any moment whether a poor person is poor because of life choices or a rich person is rich because of life choices, honestly, because it can pretty much be unclear either way. But even if you're different because of life choices, you're still one.
Mhm.
Still one with this person. So just different parts of the same thing. So what do people think about this idea? Is this something? So this is something which is familiar, unfamiliar, makes you happy, makes you angry. What do you think?
Okay, I think when you're usually like insecure, when people make you insecure, sometimes it's like you see something in them that you don't have, and that's where the insecure comes from. But it also comes from this place of like we're one, like I see what you have that I don't have. So it comes out as insecurity, but it's also from this part of like
Projection.
yeah, like it's like because I want this, because we're one.
Yeah.
Like you have the thing that I lack.
There's a high psychology on it.
Yeah.
People see the negative of what you think in yourself and other people.
Right.
As I'll look at someone and be like, I don't like that, but actually
Yeah.
that's what I don't like about myself.
Yeah. So where you're having negative feelings towards others, it could well come from the inside, because it's what I don't. Well, yeah, that's kind of like two versions, like what I don't have in materially or in qualities, or just something that I'm uncomfortable about with regards to myself. Yeah, I think that's definitely that's a great point. Elizabeth, what do you think?
I was gonna say, like, I don't know, for me, when I'm angry at someone, I feel like the last thing in my mind is the fact that we're the same.
Yeah.
It's just like a hard concept to like, even if I know it, like, I know it, like, it's obviously we all come from a shaman, like, we're all here for a reason, and like, there's reason that I'm here in this exact time period in Israel right now,
Yeah.
in 2025, born to my parents. Like, I know all of that, like, intellectually, but then, like, in the moment when I'm angry with someone because they did something, I'm not thinking about all of that. It's just not
Right.
something that
Yeah,
I
well,
go to.
well, yeah. I mean, that's yeah. Let me clarify. That's for sure not something that I go to. I mean, to the opposite isn't like
No,
that's
it's
the
just like you
time.
want to like train yourself.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah, exactly. So this is why. So like people probably around the table know more about this stuff than me, but you can call this a meditation or you can call it an exercise. But like there's to sometimes actively choose. This is why I said talk about like just doing it to people on the street, because sometimes it's good to practice when you're like out of the moment,
right.
because then it's easier. And then you've kind of worked that muscle a little bit, so you can maybe pull it out in the moment. And if I'm honest, I'm still not usually at the level where I pull it out right at the time that the person's in front of my face and maybe has done something to make me upset. But usually later that day, I can like, oh yeah, like it's because I'm like ruminating on it or something like that. So like I can pull it out and like, oh, that's a different take, and that can make me feel. I don't know what it makes me feel. It's not that it makes me feel better. It's like it's just like kind of the basis of what I'm feeling is that they're a person and I'm a person and they wronged me. But it's just if it's just that the whole foundation of that idea kind of falls away. So if you're able to access it, but I agree. Yeah, I think that was a good way you said it. It's like it is something that you need to kind of like work on in order to be able to pull out at those times. I'm sure if we're working on it lots and lots, we could probably rise to a level of consciousness where that's the natural flow. But I'm not for sure. I'm not there yet. But at least sometimes to try and think about that, I think is a very helpful thing.
Perhaps it's a challenge, big challenge to that there's a whole host of things that are not active, and we have to find the one thing or the few things out of like 1,000 that are good. Before the summer, right before October 7th, in Kiryat Moshe, I saw Jews on both sides throwing rocks at each other.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll. Yeah.
No, but to see in that moment, um, to think in that moment that what the similarities, like to look at somehow the negative code, and there was an amazing thing happening where part of on Kiryat Moshe Street, there were some yeshiva guys that were handing out candies and drinks to the people coming in from the Merkaz.
That's amazing.
So cute.
That's the
I
best.
was like, wow, these are some.
That's an amazing.
The song
That's actually.
playing in the protest last week, 2 weeks ago.
Oh, playing the
piano.
yeah. Yeah. So like people, so these are like our heroes in many ways, because like to like be able to do something like that at that time is like injecting some of this positive energy and specifically this kind of like voice of truth in some ways, in amongst the time where it's very hard and obviously easier said than done, because a lot of obviously the reasons that these happen is there's a lot of personal hurts and very negative, very, very, very negative feelings which have built up over time and stuff, and easier said than done. But like we kind of like have no choice other than to like be the ambassadors for this, and once we know this, it's kind of like no turning back. It's like we just have to try, regardless of like how that works in terms of trying. So that's just up to every individual. I'm not sure if it's necessarily a case of talking about it, but maybe doing something like that would be like unbelievable.
Yeah.
To do something like you said, and like call to the social. There's been things like that. So yeah. So I wanted to think about a few implications of this that I was. So I think number one, I'd say like the surface level thing of like the idea that we're one. I think that's something which a lot of us maybe come across and can come to terms with quite easily. But I think the first thing is like the exercise, like the actual processing of that, of just like actually thinking about that for a moment, looking at someone else. And I think that's a like a next step, which really makes things quite different. To actually be in touch is what, if anyone was at the Shira where we talked about idea of internalizing the Da'at. So there's this part of us, the sphere of Da'at, this part of us, which is like the internalizing sphere, the thing which like takes that which you know, as like Elizabeth was saying, like I know this intellectually, but like I don't feel it. So there's like things we can do to like get that flow from what we know to what we feel and how we live. So like that's definitely something which is worth working on. In addition to just the internalizing, I think there's a lot of implications which come out of this, which are very interesting, some hard hitting, some comforting. So one of the things I thought which came out of this was it's very interesting that you think that one way to encourage unity would be uniformity. Some people define unity as uniformity, everyone doing the same thing. And some people think that would be a way to at least encourage unity is through people doing the same thing. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, it's like even if we don't think we think that, we often do. Like some people think like just like I'm living life in the way that it ought to be lived. And so probably you should all live life in the same way as me, but I'll be tolerant of you. You know, I'm not a bad person, so I won't tell you to live your life differently, but I kind of think you should be living your life differently. But if you think about this system, the idea that we are different parts of one body, the system itself necessitates diversity. It doesn't just tolerate diversity. The system of unity necessitates diversity because the analogy is different parts of a body. You have to have diversity in a body, otherwise the whole thing doesn't work. You can't have two right hands. I mean, that's gonna diminish one's capacity to function in the world. If you think the head's the best, right? The head's the brain, that that's the thinking. You can't replace all the limbs with a head. It's not gonna work. So you specifically, so it's all very well saying, for example, for argument's sake, let's say the head was like the people who are into Torah learning and intellectual pursuits, and the right arm is the people who are into chesed and giving. And for argument's sake, let's say that was true. There are people whatever. There are people who think that everyone should be doing the same thing that they're doing. But it doesn't. But actually, no. Like the opposite. Like everyone has to be doing what they are meant to be doing. Now, okay, I'm not saying it's easy to work out what you're meant to be doing in life. Okay, that's a whole journey to be in touch with yourself and work out what you're doing and what you're meant to be doing in life. But if we are functioning healthily, it should come out that we're doing a lot of different things. So I think that was like a big game changer number one for me. That the diversity is not only something which it doesn't compromise this, but it's actually an inherent part of the system.
Nicole and Gabriel, the water and fire.
Yeah.
Yet being able not to compromise, but to have shalom together, but be able to have their own different ways.
Yeah, well, what Brian is referring to is a very deep thing that Maral talks about, and it's if you know the obviously the line Osei Shalom B'Mromav, that God makes peace B'Mromav in the upper realms. So Maral talks about it and says that what is that a reference to? Is that the true manifestation of shalom, of peace, is only actually possible in the upper realms, because in the upper realms is where you have fire and water. He's bringing the Malachim, which relate to that, is Michael is water and Gabriel is fire. You can have these two things which are opposites and they can coexist. That's actually the word. I think Rashi even brings it. The word shamayim comes from eshumayim. So Rashi is the etymology of the word shamayim. So you have these two opposites which can coexist, and that's the true idea of peace. The true idea of peace is not compromise. It's not let's meet in the middle. The true idea of peace is everyone should be themselves, and then we should work together. And so that's the true idea. So it's that's the kind of thing that we're praying for when we're praying for peace, and it's something which is true in the upper realms. And obviously, we have to emulate it as much as we can down here. So that's a really great example. So that's one is in terms of the diversity. I was thinking about in the unity angle, and certainly in the peace, in the shalom angle. That's a great point. A second thing that I was thinking about, which is the hard one, is that it creates a much more brutal understanding of what machloket is. The idea of where we are not getting on with each other, which obviously people are alluding to, is unfortunately something that we have seen quite a lot of over time, and we're still seeing like quite a lot of it right now. it's not just bad. It's not just like against our values. We have a value of unity and we're not living up to that value of unity. It's there's a name for it. What is the name for the kind of condition where part of the body is attacking another part of the body? So well, yeah, it relates to that, but like an autoimmune, just a category. So there's an autoimmune condition. Actually, I think people like talk about that specifically. But I was thinking also an autoimmune condition is where the body attacks itself. So that's really bad.
And there's brazen.
Say that again.
There's brazen cancer and also immune diseases. Like recently, there's been a massive spike.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's scary. Yeah, no, but that's what machloket is. Machloket is not just bad. Machloket is illness. It's illness, and that's certainly something we would want to avoid. And so on the one hand, it's very hard hitting in that sense. On the other hand, and the third thing that I was just thinking of, third and final thing I was thinking of, was that the opportunity for accessing this unity and oneness and togetherness is actually much more possible than one would think. Because if it's just that we are individuals and we're meant to be getting along as happy families, so it's it's going to be hard. It's going to be doable to some extent or not, but it's also going to be limited by time and place, right? And you can only become friends with someone who you meet, right? But according to this, you can become unified with someone who you have never met and you'll never meet. I'll come to you in just a second, but there's a reality of the unity. And just as, if one part of the body, if the mouth ingests something healthy, that's good for the whole body. They're different, it's different in time and space, and all of us are in separate places and doing different things and may never meet each other. But nevertheless, what one person does as an individual can affect the rest in a positive way. So if we tap into this mindset of unity and try and feel the oneness and even send, as it were, I'm trying to find a better word, I don't mean to cheapen it, but like send vibes, like it's a reality to send vibes through Torah, mitzvot, simcha, anything like that. You can do that to people who you have never met. And according to the system, they could benefit from that. They could actually feel something like that. They don't know where it's coming from. But who knows? Like sometimes you have a bad day and sometimes you have a better day. Like where'd that come from? So sometimes who knows? Maybe my better day came from you.
Probably the other way around.
I know. So this is something which is possible. So the possibilities for unity are basically limitless. The question, yeah.
I was gonna say, isn't there like kind of a concept of like you have 10 or 7 soulmates in this world, and like it's not all in the forms of like partners, it's like friends too, like.
I haven't heard of it. Anyone heard of this?
Well,
Yeah.
I heard it was 7, but I heard that it's like levels. Like if you're
Yeah.
doing well, you get the first place. If you do not so well, you might get 7th
Cool.
place.
Do you know where that?
I also
Yeah,
Yeah,
it could be.
I
It
should
could be. I'll
look
tell you
that
that.
up.
So the truth is, yeah,
That's very-
just like the body analogy, you can. I haven't heard that specific thing, but it would fit because the body analogies, even though all the parts of the body are really one with each other, but there's still there can be certain special connections between parts of the body. So the right hand is connected to the right forearm, for example. So it could be, and by the way, there's only a certain number of parts of the body, right? So you could find yourself as you could be the right hands together with another person. So it certainly there's an idea that there could be different, what you call certain kinds of compatibilities. That certainly would fit with the system. Yeah. Elizabeth, what you said?
Yeah, I have a completely different point. Sorry. But to diverge. What's the difference between a system needing like you were saying how like a body can't have 2 right hands, right? Because the system needs to have like inherent differency versus machloket. Because can't those 2 be confused?